Like many, I've been curious about the Nikon ZF for a long time. I think a lot of Fujifilm shooters, especially X106 users, are especially attracted to it for obvious reasons, which usually start with its retro styling. But there's so much more to this camera that you need to know. So, as someone that's had it on loan from Nikon USA for a few weeks now, and as someone that's primarily shot with the X106 as my day-to-day camera for the last year and some change, I wanted to give you a few of my first impressions. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm Chris Hagen, a video producer and photographer in Portland, Oregon, and this is not a review of the Nikon ZF yet. One is coming, just need a little bit more time with the camera first. Also, big thanks to Nikon for allowing me to check the camera out for a few weeks this summer. For transparency, no money changed hands, I don't get to keep the camera, and they won't be seeing this video before it's published. Alright, let's jump right in with the first impression right out of the box, and it's twofold because there's size and then there's design. Starting with the latter, it's a gorgeous camera that will turn heads in a good way. The dials look and feel great to turn, there's a solid click when turning them, but it's not difficult. In a few scenarios when shooting quickly, I've had no problem adjusting the ISO up and down as needed without needing to look at it. That's a bit new for me too, because on my X106 and A7 IV, I have the ISO mapped to dials on the other side of the camera that I can quickly change one-handed with my right hand. So that kind of speaks to the Nikon ZF's ease of use. In terms of size, as you've probably heard before, I needed to add a grip. I went ahead and bit the bullet almost right away and purchased the CA134 version from Neewer. As long as I'm not pushing a stroller, I'm usually walking around with a wrist strap on while holding the camera in my right hand. And even just holding the camera while setting it up, I could tell I'd want the extra comfort of having an added grip. And I'm happy I did get one because it's not a light camera. But saying that, I do want to point out something that I think a lot of us get wrong. And I'll talk more about it in the review, but the current obsession with small cameras is a bit overblown, and when you get to know the Nikon ZF and shoot with it, I don't think size is a big deterrent, especially with smaller lenses like the 40mm f2 Special Edition that I've been using with it. Also, it's the design that is most important and what makes the camera approachable. I think a lot of people like the smaller size of other cameras because they tend to draw less attention and don't stand out as much in public, but neither does the ZF. Not because of its size, but because the retro design allows it to look so casual. I've logged 23,000 steps on a Saturday in Seattle with the ZF. I've taken it on a bunch of coffee shop outings. It's hung from my neck while pushing the stroller to parks. And most important, the ZF has been an easy to carry camera while capturing some of my favorite summer moments, which is what really matters. Look, I could keep going for another 20 minutes about the size and feel of using this camera because that is an important factor, but the point is, its looks alone make it a great addition to an everyday kit, but its performance is what has me hooked right now. So let's get into that and let's talk about speed. Put simply, it's every bit of a high-end modern mirrorless camera on the inside, despite its old-school exterior. I won't go into all of the technical specs, and I don't shoot in a burst mode, but you can get 14 frames per second with the mechanical shutter shooting RAW, which is faster than a number of popular cameras on the market right now. Changing between the different modes, monochrome photos, color photos, or video, is instantaneous. Navigating the menus is quick and snappy, so is reviewing photos. Just everything about the camera is a smooth, quick, seamless process. And for me, someone that still owns and shoots with some of Sony's newer cameras, this is kind of the speed that I expect. But depending on what brand or camera you're coming from, especially if it's an older camera, it could be a noticeable difference. Now, speed also applies to autofocus, and stress testing the autofocus brought out the best in the Nikon ZF. I'll explain. Through my first 2 weeks, most of my casual photography with the ZF was pretty run-of-the-mill. Some moving subjects, but mostly people and things that weren't really moving quickly. I did notice that sometimes through my viewfinder, whether I was using 3D tracking or single point autofocus, it would appear as though sometimes the subject, especially a stationary subject, wasn't in focus while taking the shot, but when reviewing it, it actually was in focus. It threw me off a little bit at first, but I got past it and just learned to trust the camera. Plus, this rarely happened. It was more recently, when taking some photos on a popular Portland bridge, that I really started to appreciate not just how fast the autofocus is, but how good the subject recognition was with 3D tracking. These bikes were flying past me, and the ZF not only identified them quickly, but once they locked on, they tracked really well. I was most impressed that if I quickly snapped 2 rapid shots, the first may just lock onto the body, but it would instantly recognize the subject and then snap the focus box to the head or face of the biker. Now, this isn't exactly a scientific test that I've done with all of my cameras, but the feel of it was different from anything else in my arsenal, including my Sony a7 IV and Fujifilm X100VI. The point is, this camera feels as good as it looks to shoot with. As for image quality, we'll get to the imaging cloud recipes in a second, but overall, it's been as advertised, especially in terms of image noise. One of the first nights I had it, I put the camera in aperture priority and handed it off to my wife to take a few goofy portraits I needed to send off. I was using one of my video lights, nothing near the power of a flash, and when I saw how clean the photos looked, I figured they were around ISO 400 or so. Turns out they were more like 1600 ISO or more. And just having shot on some of my other full frame cameras over the years, I don't think I ever got raw photos that looked like this at that ISO. And again, speaking more to the X100VI crowd here, since you max out at f2 instead of some of the brighter 1.4 APS-C lenses, this is where full frame starts to make a bigger difference. I haven't snapped a ton of nighttime photos with the ZF yet, but it's just more capable of giving you cleaner images when light is at a premium. I'll also say the full frame light gathering abilities saved me from a careless operator error I made at the park. I was filming a few clips of my daughter swinging, so I moved the camera out of aperture priority and auto ISO into manual mode and ISO 100 since it was still bright-ish at sunset. Well, I forgot to put the camera back into auto ISO when I went back to taking photos in aperture priority. So with my ISO locked in at ISO 100, only the shutter could adjust to compensate for light. Now, I didn't catch this mistake until after I'd taken all of these other photos of my daughter swinging, and I just knew the shutter speed was going to be too slow to freeze motion. Well, turns out it wasn't. It remained at 1/400th of a second or better, and still fast enough to make some crispy photos on the swing. If my X100VI was at its base ISO at that time of the day, the shutter would have been way too slow to freeze motion. And also, you may have noticed that I made a few Fujifilm references so far. I have a story coming at the end that will make it all make a little bit more sense, so stick with me. Okay, so recipes. I'll do my best to keep it brief because I have an entire, very detailed video on that matter coming soon. So if you think I'm leaving things out, I kind of am because I just don't want to go on and on and on, but the best way I can sum it up is that Nikon and Fujifilm have very, very different systems when it comes to creating recipes and saving them to your camera. Nikon's is not as simple to learn, but it is deeper. You have control of individual colors and parts of the image that Fujifilm doesn't come close to. But on the other hand, Fujifilm's is a little easier to get the hang of quicker, and their film simulations do a lot of the lifting for you. So you can get a very stylized look with fewer tweaks to the settings. If you're going for a more grainy texture straight out of camera, Fujifilm allows you a few settings to control that. Nikon does not. But again, not everyone's going to be chasing that textury film look. And if you're not and want more of a modern look or just more of a customizable look with creative colors that you typically need Lightroom to achieve, things like split toning, adjusting the hue and saturation and brightness of individual colors, changing the black point, and complete control over the tone curve, these are all things that Nikon gives you that can really crank out some great shots. I've put in quite a bit of work on my own recipe, and I think it's close. Check back with me when I do the full video on the recipe systems, and I'll probably have it dialed in. Moving to image stabilization in terms of filming, again, it's what you'd expect. I haven't shot a ton of video with the ZF yet, but with a steady hand, I've had no issues. The neutral profile straight out of camera is a decent one for capturing quick clips that you can add a little saturation or something to later, but I do like how it looks straight out of camera too. And the in-log profile also grades really well. Most important is how easy it is to operate. I went in and set up my video settings once, and in manual mode, it's good to go with my preferred resolution, frame rate, and shutter speed as soon as I move that dial from photos over to video. No deep diving into menus or anything like that. Finally, we've made our way to price and value, and the story I promised, tying in some of the Fujifilm comparisons that I've made along the way. First of all, I love my X100 VI. I'm not doing the whole I'm switching brands thing. If I do eventually pick up a Nikon ZF of my own, it would probably be in addition to my X100 VI because I think they both have their place. And I just like cameras, like all cameras. But I recently had a friend who was a Sony shooter, A7S III and FX3, two great cameras, but he just wasn't doing as much video work and sold them off. Well, he mentioned he missed having a camera and had seen how much I like my X100 VI. Now, he wasn't after that model, but instead Fujifilm's XS20, a great hybrid camera that has a lot of really good video features. So if you're into that, look that way. The main thing holding him back from pulling the trigger on a purchase was, would he regret picking that up instead of the full-frame Sony a7 IV, something he was probably a little more familiar with, having previously been a Sony shooter. The price for that camera was just more than he wanted to spend. So, having had enough time with the ZF, I said, man, you really need to check out the Nikon ZF. The price sits under the a7 IV with a lot of the same capabilities, and even some better, just in a different package. The ZF is often on sale too, as little as $1,600 or $1,700 in the United States. Once upon a time, Fujifilm's offerings consistently came in well below that and offered really great value. But now, if pricing for recent releases is an indication of where they're headed, that's tough. I am now firmly of the opinion that the ZF is either underpriced or everything else is overpriced. If I were in the market for a retro-styled everyday camera, which it seems a lot of people are, I just don't see how you can pass up on the value of full frame at this price point. When it comes to size and performance and quality, the X100 VI is one of one in my opinion. I picked it up after not touching it for 2 weeks, and yeah, I do miss that form factor for carrying every day. But elsewhere with the APS-C format, once you start getting into better, brighter lenses, they tend to get bigger as well, and the whole advantage of having a smaller APS-C kit starts to disappear. But hey, my friend who did not go with the ZF is happy with his purchase and is already taking some great photos. And that's the point, by the way. Whatever camera you have, go use it. If it inspires you to shoot more, it's a good camera no matter what anyone else says. So I'm happy for him, and I want you guys to make the best decisions for you as well. So that's kind of why I make these videos. Anyway, I'd love to hear how many of you are on the fence when it comes to the Nikon ZF, and if you're pondering a switch from Fujifilm. It's always interesting to me because as many people as I see thinking about making that change, I see just as many going the other direction because of the size of the ZF. To me, that added size and weight just aren't that much of a factor, I guess. Thanks so much for watching this one, and I'll see you next time.